Hello and welcome to another letter in the RCO's A to Z of the organ. Today's letter is P, and today P stands for Pistons. Here we have a small 2-manual and pedal organ. It's a small organ, but it has many pistons. Pistons are these buttons that you see decorating the console. We have here thumb pistons and toe pistons. These are called thumb pistons because when you need to access a piston, the chances are you're playing on the manual above the piston, and therefore the obvious digit to use is your thumb. The toe pistons, the name of the toe pistons is pretty obvious. You're going to operate the toe pistons with the toe of your shoe. Now, what are pistons for? The pistons underneath the swell manual operate combinations of stops on the swell, and most organists set up their pistons in a crescendo. Listen, here's piston 1 on the swell, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And similarly, the pistons underneath the grate manual operate combinations of stops on the grate, and most organists set them up in a crescendo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Toe pistons, these are set to the right above the pedal board, and we only have 3 pedal stops on this organ. So if I just show you piston 1 on the pedal and contrast it with piston 6, you can hear that similarly I have those set up in a crescendo. Pistons are so convenient that sometimes you need to change 2 departments of pistons at the same time, and we can do that via this stop here, the grate and pedal combinations coupler. This means that once I've drawn the stop and press a grate piston, I would get a result on both the grate and also the pedal. And similarly, if I draw a toe piston, I get a result on not just the pedals, but also the grate. Above the top manual, we have yet more pistons. Whereas we only had 6 underneath the manuals, now we have 8. And they have 3 letters as well as their numbers. Gen stands for general. On other instruments, the general pistons don't necessarily have GEN on them, but they tend to be arranged away from the other pistons, as here above the top manual, sometimes set to the left. And the general pistons bring on combinations of stops from any department of the organ, including possibly the couplers. Now, whereas the department pistons, swell, grate and pedal pistons, are generally set up in a crescendo, don't expect that of the general pistons. Listen here. Here's general 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. You can hear what I mean. General pistons are so useful, especially when playing through a program, or indeed perhaps a Sunday service, that even 8 is not nearly enough. So fortunately on modern consoles, you have layers of memory so that you can reuse the same piston several times over. And even better, on a luxury console, you have something called a stepper. You can then scroll through your general pistons. This is general 1, here's general 2, here's general 3, and so on. And once the setter has taken you to general 8, you press it again and it automatically moves you to the next layer of memory. We have 64 levels of memory on this small organ, and well, sometimes we use them all. Suppose you wanted to change the combinations of stops on your pistons. Well, you can do that, but a word of warning: if you're not the person with prime responsibility for the instrument on which you're playing, don't change those pistons without permission. Now, if you do have permission, this is what to do. Choose the stops that you want for your piston. For example, suppose I wanted to be rather eccentric and put a loud registration on my grate piston 1. I'm going to draw lots of stops here. So I've drawn my stops, and now I'm going to push in my setter piston, and it's down here on the far left underneath the lowest manual. I'm going to hold it in and I'm going to press General 1. I'll then cancel it just to check. And when I press General 1, bingo, I've got it right. Okay, that's all we have time for today. But before I go, let me just introduce you to the most useful of all pistons, the general cancel, always on the bottom right of the manual, underneath the bottom manual, and that cancels all the stops you had. For example, whatever they are, couplers, here we go, general cancel, and that cancels me too, so I thank you very much for joining me, and don't forget to look out for the next letter in the RCO's A to Z.